Good evening. Oh, come on, it's Cleveland Heights. We could do better than that. Good evening. As she stated, my name is Alan Bozeman. I am a Cleveland Heights native who resides in the Coventry area. I am the proud father of 3 children, Tristan, Bryce, and Imani. My son Tristan over there, my oldest, is his birthday today. He's 14, so shout out to him. I am also owner of a law firm, the Sherman Bozeman Legal Group, promotions and consulting company, Telefirm Promotions, who's done some great work here in Cleveland Heights. About 10 years ago, my wife and I decided to move back to Cleveland Heights. My wife's actually not from Cleveland Heights, but she's very supportive of this community. At that time, we made that decision because it was so important to us that our children be raised in an environment that was diverse, that was community-oriented, and had some of the trappings of the good old days where kids ride their bikes to school and play with neighborhood children and have certain community places they go to, like Tommy's, to grab shakes and food. That was really important to us. Our children have been in Cleveland Heights School since they were in kindergarten, and so I'm proud to say that. We can clap for that, come on. And so I wanted to make sure they came out today so they can be part of this process. I also want to thank all of you for being here. As we've seen over this past week, it is very important that all of us engage in the political process. Or we might have outcomes that we don't like, or we will deal with other problems and issues that will impact us down the road. I also like to thank the state and county officials who are here, city council members, community leaders, and City Hall staff who are present with us today. Huge thanks to the Dobama Theater staff, specifically Elise, Amy, and Nathan, and library staff, Nancy Levin, Cheryl Banks, for use of the space and their excellent guidance throughout this process. Few housekeeping notes before we get started. This is a theater, so there will be a rehearsal immediately following the State of the Union. So when this is over, I ask that you quietly and quickly exit so they can have their rehearsal. But we do want to encourage ongoing dialogue about the things you hear tonight. So feel free to have those conversations in the lobby, all throughout the entire library, and specifically in the newly opened Cedar Lee Dora. So we are encouraging those conversations, just not in here, okay, guys? For the press who are here, the mayor will conduct interviews in the glassed-off common area on the first floor just beyond the box office. But at this time, please, no flash photography. We want to keep everyone focused, and I know I get distracted easily, so please, no flash. This will be a real simple program. First, our esteemed mayor, Khalil Saran, will deliver his state of the city, and followed by a brief Q&A between myself and the mayor. Just so you know, for efficiency purposes, we have already collected the questions that will be asked. They were submitted through the city news and social media accounts, and we consolidated into about 3 or 4 questions that we will discuss today. If there are any other concerns or questions that anyone in the room has, we ask that you please submit them through the Mayor's Action Center, and the administration will get back to you as soon as possible, okay? And without any further ado, I'd like to welcome our mayor, Khalil Saran.
First, I'd like to thank all of you for joining me tonight. I know all of our esteemed guests from the state government. I believe Juanita Brent is here, our state rep. Our county council member-elect, where are we looking? Mike Hauser is here. And I'd also like to thank our council members who are here in attendance. I see Councilman Posh, Councilman Petrus, Councilman Maddox, and somewhere I feel like our Council President Kuda is here. Is Council President here? All right. Also, our Municipal Court Judge, J.J. Costello, is here. Please give him a round of applause. And our School Board President, Jody Serini, is in attendance as well. Thank you for being here. I'd also like to thank all of the people who made this event possible, both here at Dobama and in communications and in the mayor's office. You know, I'm just up here giving a speech, but all of you make it possible for me to actually give the speech to people. And so I appreciate your work on this event. As 2024 ends, we will mark our 3rd year in this new era of city government, finally exiting our terrible 2s and beginning our terrible 3s. This year has seen a continuation of the progress that we had hoped for when we began this journey together. But by no means has this been easy. Very few worthwhile destinations are at the end of an easy road. Often, and especially while we are struggling through trials and fighting against headwinds, we have a tendency to give particular attention to our failures and the dangers that may exist around the corner. That's a part of our shared humanity. It can help us keep us safe in perilous times. But that part of our human nature can also mean that we have a harder time celebrating our successes and seeing our potential. The work that we do together for our community requires a sense of possibility to keep us moving forward. So I'd like to begin our time together tonight, focusing on what we have to be proud of and hopeful for in Cleveland Heights. We can see all of the clear evidence that despite our history, despite a difficult global economy, despite political turmoil from the local all the way to the national level, Cleveland Heights has found a way to turn a corner on development in our city. Right now, we are watching, just down the street, phase 1 of the long-awaited, long overdue project at Cedar Lee Meadowbrook race toward completion within the next couple of months, with phase 2 marching right behind in 2025. Now, this is a project, a generation in the making, coming to fruition right now. As CLM becomes a reality, we are also anticipating the imminent physical manifestation of the first significant investment in the Noble Nela Business District in over 2 decades. Not to be left behind, Kane Park Village along Taylor Road is witnessing the start of a massive preservation project to revitalize the historic Taylor Tudor buildings, which until now have been an example of neglect and urban decay. These projects together represent over $100 million in investment in the development of our city, with so much more to come. The next phases of the Kane Park Village revitalization alone are expected to bring an additional $100 million in investment and will dramatically reshape and modernize that business district. And what we've accomplished already is a lot to be proud of. And we're still just beginning. Right now in Cleveland Heights, after years of daydreaming and fantasizing, hoping, praying, debating, and sometimes arguing, we can finally see a light at the end of a decade-long tunnel in the redevelopment of the most important and challenging development opportunity we have, Severance. Earlier this year, I announced the good news that the owner of the majority of the Severance property had come to an agreement with a master developer to chart a new path for more than 40 acres of underutilized space at the center of our city. A sea of asphalt, surrounding far too much vacant, out-of-date commercial space that does little to benefit our community. Through our continuing and wide-ranging conversations with property developers, we were finally able to find, approach, and convince an extremely well-qualified developer to take on this challenge. Now, we as a government partner and as a wider community will be involved in the process of discovering how Severance will evolve. And so I want to take a moment to encourage each one of you here today and each one of you listening to seek out and take advantage of the many upcoming opportunities to express what I'm sure are strong opinions in Cleveland Heights about how this town center gets built. Now, I've said it before, and I'm sure I'll say it again. We don't pursue development just because we like to see cranes in the sky or excavators moving mountains of dirt, although almost any almost 3-year-old can tell you that construction equipment is cool, and we are almost 3 years old. It's not because we want developers to make money either. You know, I've known since the 80s that trickle-down economics is a fiction. It doesn't trickle down from the developers to us. The real reason we pursue development is because a community that doesn't change and grow with the times is a community that stagnates and dies. A community that is treading water and managing decline will find itself less and less equipped to provide basic services in safe, healthy neighborhoods, opportunities for social and recreational enjoyment, amenities that increase our quality of life. And so that's why we're creative and aggressive and receptive with regard to development, but always with an eye toward what benefit it can bring to the people of our city. So what else beyond these large, I'm sure impressive development efforts have we been doing to try to create and improve that community benefit? Well, quite a bit. Although a lot of the work that we've been doing in year 3 is still foundational and maybe a little less obvious. And one of the most important goals that I have as your mayor is to leave our government more capable than I found it. And to that end, we have engaged in several initiatives that will help us get better and better at serving you. The first I'd like to highlight, you might never otherwise see, but you will see the results. And that is the hiring this year of our first organizational performance coordinator, who's in the audience with us today. Any organization knows that the constant challenges of addressing the emergency of the day, especially when historically under-resourced, can completely destroy its ability to explore better ways to achieve its goals. Many of our directors, many of whom are here today as well, and thank you for being here, and other employees of the city are doing the jobs of 2 or 3 people now in order to make sure that the garbage and the recycling are picked up, that the pickleball court is ready for play, that the ambulance has a full crew and doesn't break down on the way to save a life. It is my view that we should always strive to make that public service easier, not harder. But Cleveland Heights needed a dedicated expert to help us rise above, "We've always done it this way," or "I don't have time to find ways to save time." In the short while that our performance coordinator, Ms. Heim, has been with us this year, I've already seen major strides in project management in our communications department, and improvements in our procurement process, or even including a greater understanding of what those processes are overall. Not only that, some of you already know Mr. Walburn, who also joined the team this year as the new Mayor's Action Center coordinator. In addition to his work in rolling out our new Access Cleveland Heights software and mobile app, and really wrapping his arms around our community with considerate and practical responses to resident concerns, Mr. Walburn has also been working together diligently with Ms. Heim to design and improve methods for responding to your service requests in coordination with the departments that get the job done. And we're trying to get the job done in more sustainable ways as well. Our first sustainability coordinator, Dr. Boateng, has been hard at work helping us remember to view things globally and locally around issues of environmental sustainability. Now, many of you know that we have been working on a climate action and resiliency plan for the city of Cleveland Heights for quite a while, and we are almost ready to finalize it and begin our implementation. But we need your help. Over the next day or so, we will be publicly releasing a draft plan so that the people of Cleveland Heights have an opportunity to review and make comments. This comment period is important because we know that we can't have this conversation without you. Once you've had the chance to weigh in, and we've had the chance to incorporate these comments, our plan will be ready for prime time and ready for implementation. So please be on the lookout for that draft plan, and thank you in advance for providing your perspective. Now, Dr. Boateng and the City of Cleveland Heights aren't just planning, though. We are actively working to make choices that will increase our environmental and economic efficiency. And we're doing that right now, whether it's through our continuing commitment to expanding our fleet of electric vehicles, to get housing inspectors to the job site, or to lower our energy use by using energy savings themselves to finance the improvements. And that's working with Leopardo Energy. We know that we can't just write a plan and stick it on a shelf like we've done for decades. In order to be the Cleveland Heights that we want to be, we have to make the plans while we do the work. Now, a more public example of this principle is found in our Planning, Neighborhoods, and Development Department. Once a set of disparate groups within our city's administration, this department now includes planning, community development, economic development, code compliance, and building and permitting. This department has been busy this year and knocking it out of the park. Of course, all of these development projects that I mentioned earlier have been moving. But now we are actually planning for the future of our community in a way that it is much more likely to result in the equitable development that we want to see in every corner of our city. For the first time in our history, we are planning for the improvement of the Noble Road corridor, both as a whole and with a focus on each of the several business districts through which it runs. We have begun a neighborhood planning project as well, beginning with a deep dive into the North Coventry neighborhood, an area of our city that is often overlooked, to the point where it's even overlooked in the discussion about historical investment inequity. Our goal is to focus on the needs of each of our neighborhoods individually, to make sure that every single one of them is given the attention and care that they need in order to provide them the quality of life that we expect in Cleveland Heights. We're starting with North Coventry, and from there we will create a model for every one of our neighborhoods and create a high bar for every one of those neighborhoods with regard to quality. Now, we made a plan a while back to move away from our complete dependence on an outside company to perform our permitting, plans examination, code compliance inspections for point of sale, commercial property inspections. And in 2024, we have made great progress toward that goal. We've staffed up in our code compliance division, no longer relying on outsourcing home inspections, and invested in the necessary vehicles and equipment to allow our inspectors to get to a property in a timely manner to perform those duties. Further than that, we've had the amazing fortune to hire our first chief building official, Mr. Elmy, to help us continue the process of bringing this important health and safety service back in-house. And it was great timing. All of you remember the not one, but two facade failures that we experienced this year. first in the Cedar Fairmount District, and then in the Center Mayfield District. Given our city's relative inexperience with this phenomenon, Mr. Elmy was the right person for the job. He got right to work with our fire inspector and the property owners' engineers on site to investigate and address the issues in the high-touch way that we would expect from a Cleveland Heights CBO. And once the immediate issues were receiving the necessary response, Mr. Elmy got right to work again, crafting policy changes that will help us avoid this type of situation in the future. We're planning and we're doing at the same time. And we're seeing similar growth and evolution in other areas of city government as well. Just recently, we've welcomed a new and very well-received member of our Parks and Recreation team, Director Gonzalez. I think you're here. Are you here today? Director Gonzalez is with us. Now, I've got high expectations for the new director. And so far, even though he has just started working with us, based on his focus on true teamwork and his cooperative interaction with our already amazing team over at Parks and Rec, I'm optimistic that we are already moving in the right direction. In Public Works, under the leadership of Director Clinkscale, is also growing and changing. We are building capacity in the DPW leadership structure to include specific focus on operations, led by newly promoted Assistant Director Ferrone, and with a specific focus on capital projects, a position for which we are currently hiring. This additional capacity will allow the municipal organization as a whole to be more efficient and prompt in the pursuit of the everyday provision of services, even while major projects need to be conceived, contracted, and completed. This additional capacity will allow us to more fully implement the new vision for the state of safe, equitable transportation methods in our city. It'll bring the management of public properties under the umbrella of DPW to benefit from expertise found there and to maximize on the benefits of our embrace of new technologies in road, sewer, refuse collection, and urban tree management. Now, public safety is evolving as well. This June, we began a partnership with Metro Health Recovery Resources, Cuyahoga County, and the cities of Shaker Heights, University Heights, South Euclid, and Richmond Heights to expand the First Call co-responder program into our city. Now, this program is in its nascent stages, but our ultimate goal is to fully integrate a multi-pronged response to public safety calls. And through this partnership, we have brought on board 2 social work professionals to assist and respond alongside law enforcement officers to offer a more holistic, effective, and sustainable answer to the mental health and substance use issues that are endemic in our communities. Right now, Cleveland Heights is fighting to become what we are meant to be. Each of the examples that I've mentioned above is one of many changes that have been made or are planned for our city government, with more and more to come. Now, change is always difficult. We've seen that this year. We've seen that for the last 3. And we've experienced our share of trials that have made it clear that we will have to keep fighting for that change. I'm here to tell you that we, as a city and as a government, are prepared to win that fight. Now, I've spent a lot of time talking about the things that I'm proud of. A few examples showing the direction of our city. And I've stayed away from some of the challenges that we've faced, some of the lessons that we've learned. I've done that for a reason, and I imagine that the questions that I'll be receiving will take a lot of those challenges into account. I'm open to these questions. I'm open to hard questions. I know that the communications staff have compiled some of the questions into more holistic and unified conversation topics. But I anticipate that in the course of the discussion that I have with Mr. Bozeman that we're going to get a little bit specific as well tonight. And so I look forward to expanding on this and more during this question and answer period. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mayor. This first question is really near and dear to my heart. I grew up off of Monticello and Noble, but currently live in the Coventry area. There's been a huge surge of promising economic development in the past year, namely the near completion of the Meadowbrook Lee project, the beginning of Tudor Taylor, and the promise, what we just heard, of Severance. A frequent criticism, however, is that the city is focused on larger, more well-known economic districts, while some districts feel like they've been left behind. And my question is, how do you intend to prioritize historically underserved business districts and their surrounding neighborhoods?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the question, but also thank you for being here and participating in this community conversation and really being a conduit for these questions that our community has. So I and the City Council alike are dedicated to finding ways to reverse or counteract a level of disinvestment in some portions of our city that has been in high contrast with some of the investment that we've seen in other areas of our city. This has been a long-standing problem, and the issues that we have to address in order to deal with that problem are larger than our city. We know that. We all know that. One of the reasons I brought up planning today, talking about the plans that we're making under Director Eric Zampt, working with communities, going into communities in a way that we haven't really before, to determine what those needs are, to determine how we can invest in a way that's sustainable, will hopefully help us to not only counteract what has been primarily a flight of private investment from some of our communities, counteract that, and maybe try to bridge the gap that private investment isn't quite ready to make yet. So what does that look like? That looks like, for one, frankly, pushing really, really hard for the completion of the deal with TWG and StartRight CDC to produce the first significant investment in the Noble Nela Business District, for instance. That's one of the ways that it looks. The other way, though, is having a mayor. I'll tell you a story. Having a mayor that drives around, walks around, notices that a building that looks in pretty bad shape on Taylor, it got new ownership. There was a sign outside of this building that was requesting, if you want to rent space here, this is who you call. I called the number. I talked to the owner. Young black man, just bought this building and wants to turn it into something great. And so I connected him with our economic development and community development teams. And they are working on a project to enhance the storefront, to enhance the streetscaping right now. This is investment that we're putting in the northern end of our city because somebody was willing to make that connection. Now, I can't be the person driving around all the time, but that just sets a stage, that particular example. But more than that, you know, I tend to, and I'm gonna divert a little bit to this tendency that I've created, this pattern that I've created, where on every Arbor Day, I'll go to the border of one of our neighboring cities and plant a tree in collaboration with the mayor of that city. Done this all 3 years of Arbor Days. And this year, we went to not just the border of our city, but just across the border, on a property that the city of Cleveland Heights owns, but is just outside of our municipality in the city of East Cleveland. And that's where we planted that Arbor Day tree. That's where Director Clinkscale and the Department of Public Works went over, cleared out the massive amount of dumping that had been taking place on this vacant lot that is our responsibility, cleaned it up, and we're getting prepared to design a park there until we can figure out a way to make a development there profitable and attractive to developers. Until then, it can be a community amenity that will incorporate both cities in that single neighborhood as one. That's how we need to see ourselves, and that's sort of the starting point for ensuring that we are focusing on development in an equitable way, is that we are seeing each other as part of the same city, part of the same community. And it doesn't matter that that park space is going to be technically in the city of East Cleveland. We own it. And we can provide an amenity that will benefit that entire neighborhood and the people of Cleveland Heights. While we prepare, through our planning process for the Noble Road Corridor, Noble Nela, Noble Monticello, the Warrensville Triangle, and we incorporate that planning into the next steps, which is attracting developers into what we find is possible and necessary there. This is how we do the plan while doing. But we got to have the plan too. And one of the things that we know is that in less financially attractive markets for developers, you got to have something really well thought out in order to provide the incentive for somebody to come in and want to start a business. Now, that building on Taylor, just west of you know, if you take, what is it, Grayton, I think it's at Taylor and Grayton, that building could potentially become a neighborhood hub, the place where people can go get a pastry or a coffee or sit together outside in a public space, a patio, and commune with neighbors. That's the kind of development I want to see, that incremental development that is born of the planning process so that we know that when we put something somewhere, it's not going to die 2 months later.
I love that. And I see my mother shaking her head in agreement, nodding. Because, again, when I was a kid, those areas were flourishing with grocery stores and all type of small businesses. So that's awesome to hear. Part and parcel to having these new developments, Cleveland Heights is a walking city. People walk throughout the city, whether it's in the areas we've already discussed, or hopefully soon in some of the other underserved areas where that hasn't been as frequent. But in order to do that, you need safe streets for commuters. And in 2022, your administration launched a citywide traffic calming program. And before that, the city adopted award-winning complete and green streets policy and its commitment to Vision Zero principles for eliminating all traffic fatalities and severe injuries while increasing safe, healthy, equitable mobility. And I'm sure the community wants to know what has happened with the traffic calming since then, and how do you plan to fulfill your commitment to the public?
All right, so thank you. traffic calming is one of those things that appeals to me in a variety of ways. One, I like to walk across the street and not get hit by a car, just like everybody else in this room, okay, just on a personal level. I also don't want any of you to be injured in a traffic collision. It's devastating every time something like that happens. And I know that, no matter how many police we hire, if we spent our entire budget on police, we wouldn't be able to consistently patrol effectively every single street, every single corner, in order to stop every single speeder or person who decides they're only looking for cars when they're making a right turn at a stop sign. We can't police our way out of this problem. We know that. Now, police can be extremely helpful when it comes to the enforcement of our traffic laws, and having a full contingent in our division of police is important so that we can bring back that more robust enforcement of those things that really, really impact the safety of our roads, like speeding, for instance, running the stoplights that we're seeing now all over the place. But making physical changes is an important way that we can just intrinsically encourage drivers to be more careful. Now, we've done a few demonstration projects, and I think this is where we go when I talk about this question and answer period, bringing forth the failures. Every organization will have them. It's about how you learn and what you do next that's important. Now, in the original design of our traffic calming project, we were very concerned that if we start putting speed bumps on people's streets, we are going to have people with pitchforks at City Hall, right? If we do not create a system where we can get buy-in, where we can mandate buy-in from a street, then we're going to have some major problems and we're going to have to walk some things back. It was well-meaning, that design. We were asking for petitions. We wanted 50+1% of a street to agree to some of our changes, but that was a mistake. I think we learned that both in the lack of a real rollout, because there was this expansive process to even get to the point where we would do the research on the speeding activity, and then we would have to do it in a ridiculous way, which is being on-site. But we learned, and things are changing now. So our process now, with the assistance of Director Klinkscale in Public Works, Planning Director Zanft, also with Chief Britton, we are working through a process of determining speeding activity in the city without ever having to place one of those little signs that tells you what speed you're going, because we can review traffic speed data through the cell phones that we're all carrying in our cars now. And so we can look at where speeding activity is higher. We can decide whether or not we care if it's just a little bit of speeding. And what we've started to do is take more control and have it be less. This is going to sound awkward and controversial, but less of a community engagement process in determining where public safety needs to be met. And so I've reached out, and I'm waiting for more responses from our school district. I've reached out specifically to principals and assistant principals of our public elementary and middle schools to inquire what their perspective might be about the most dangerous intersections or stretches of road around them, around those specific schools. And I'm going to take that feedback, and if they give me that feedback, I'll take the feedback. If we don't get feedback, we're going to start making these decisions for ourselves, and we're going to start putting speed bumps or speed humps in front of the stop signs around schools. Because I'll tell you, if you're going 20 miles an hour through a stop sign or 15 miles an hour through a stop sign, you're not stopping. Speed bump will take you down. Speed bump will take you down to, 1 to 2 or 2 to 5 miles an hour. which might be just enough time for you to take a look and see that kid stepping off the curb. Now, we've also got problems with, sort of middle of the block speeding, somebody racing from stop sign to stop sign. And in those instances, especially around schools where our kids are walking to school sometimes early in the morning, when it's still dark outside, mid-block speed humps are what we're looking at installing, whether or not we get the feedback from the school district. We want to be a partner in that way, and I know they've got other things that they're focused on. So I don't expect them to just be my resource whenever I need. So I reached out, but that's something that we're going to be implementing. And that has required a change in perspective at the city level. When we think traffic calming, a lot of times what engineers, traffic engineers, a lot of times what they think, sort of in the larger established institutions, we're thinking large construction projects. We're thinking, dramatically and permanently narrowing the intersection at North Park and Harcourt to prevent people from taking that corner at 35, 40 miles an hour and just racing down Harcourt. We're thinking about the kinds of signals that you would see, just reminding people that there's a stop sign coming up, that kind of thing, instead of really focusing our efforts on making driving more difficult. That's where the fear comes in, because we all want traffic calming until we got to slow down. And that's where the fear comes in, and that's why it's been such a tough road. But we have been making progress, and I'll give you a couple examples. Obviously, the lane narrowing at Harcourt is something that people have wanted for years. The new signage, lighted signage, to really let people know, to let drivers know, in the dark of night, that there is an intersection coming up that if you continue to go straight, you will plow into somebody's house. We want people to know that well in advance, and we want to give people an opportunity to slow down a bit, which is why we've installed that speed hump on Taylor. More than that, we are preparing to install a demonstration traffic circle, if we can, before the end of the year over on Caledonia. I know that there was a recent news story about us not having done that yet, but that's in the works, and we're trying to work through getting a non-permanent solution installed that we would then have to train our plow drivers to make sure they know about and drive around in that area if we ever get snow again. But I do want to say, this is something that we are still dedicated to. And going back to our necessary increases in capacity at the organizational level, we know that there is a Vision Zero dedication that we have. Our Complete and Green Streets policy is award-winning for good reason. And I think since we passed that, it sort of shows the disconnect that has historically existed between sort of the policy that we are asking people to implement and the capacity to implement it. Now I think there's more of a connection, and I think we'll be able to, especially once we get our new capital projects assistant director on board, we'll be able to make that connection at the outset of the design of any road project, so that we can make sure that we are adhering to the goals that we've set for ourselves.
That's great to hear. And I totally understood your point when you said we all want the calming until we're told to slow down. I have children, and I know there's other people here who have children who ride their bikes to school, and to know that these efforts are taking place is great to hear. But you said something that leads me to my next question. Will we get snow again? I'm not complaining, I'm gonna be clear about the weather right now. But we can tell the fact that it was about 70, 75 degrees this week, that we're reminded that climate change is real. And we live in a community that's very green focused. I always say Cleveland Heights is a hippie community, and I mean that in the best way possible. Where we're very in tune with our environment. And I'm sure many residents want to know, what is Cleveland Heights doing to fight climate change? And what are some of the concrete steps that the city is taking to reduce carbon emissions causing global warming?
Okay, so the first thing I want to get out of the way is that we all know that Cleveland Heights cannot, by itself, solve the negative impacts of global climate change. We know that. So let's move past that, because that's always the start of some of the discussions we have. What we can do, though, is be a part of a larger solution. And really, the two options are we can be a part of the problem, or we can be a part of the solution. We're never going to be the whole problem, and we're never going to be the whole solution. I'd rather be a part of the solution than the problem, and I feel like Cleveland Heights is with me on that. Now, the second thing, though, is that not only can we improve our impact on the environment with a goal toward, and I'll I guess scoop this, now, with a goal of net neutrality, carbon neutrality by 2050. That's what we're shooting for conceptually. I think the plan, the Climate Action and Resiliency Plan, is something that will be the roadmap, will help us create the more practical tactics that we employ over the years to increase our ability to do all of the things that a government needs to do without impacting our environment in the negative ways that a government can. I'm gonna start with what we've done a little bit. One of the first things that I did when I got this office, when I joined the administration, was to take the opportunity to convert all of our electrical requirements, the electricity that we purchase for our government facilities, and source those from carbon-free sources, from renewable sources. So all of our facilities run on renewable electricity. That was something that I thought was a simple, way that we could dramatically impact our negative impact. The second thing that I did was, when provided the opportunity, and I hope that all of you are aware of this and care enough to look into this, we're a NOPEC community. That is a community aggregation for electricity that you are opted in by default. You have to proactively opt out. And one of the things that I did in coordination with NOPEC is to make us a complete 100% renewable community aggregation city. And so anytime you don't opt out of our standard default NOPEC option for electricity, you are receiving electricity that has been produced by renewable sources. That's another way that I thought we could just easily, flick that switch and do the right thing. Now, beyond that, we have put a lot of investment, and not all of it the city's internal tax dollars, but grants from NOPEC, for instance, because they provide money to cities to allow us to do these things. Grants from NOACA, which is the Regional Transportation Authority, and Clean Air Authority, in order to enhance our capabilities at City Hall, for one, so that we can charge electric vehicles, because without doing that groundwork on our electrical capacity, would not be able to deploy I think it's 14 or 15 now, electric vehicles that are taking people from City Hall to a home that needs an inspection, or to a commercial building that requires an inspection. That's the start. I created a policy, a vehicle purchase policy, that by default, our first option is an electric vehicle. Our second option, when it is operationally necessary or beneficial, as in the case with some of our safety vehicles like police cruisers, that we will go with the hybrid option. Now, the reason for that is because in an emergency where we might have no power, you don't want those vehicles to go down if they run out of juice. And so the hybrid option makes a little bit more sense in a community where we've got tall trees and elevated electrical wires. And increasingly concerning weather patterns because the power may very well go out. So hybrid vehicles in that case. And then only when absolutely necessary do we pursue the ICE option, the internal combustion engine option. That is the standard policy of the administration now. It's taken some getting used to. There have been some hiccups, but we're getting on board and we're realizing that this is the new direction. Not only that, but it's more economically feasible. Gas prices can be insane. One year, we almost ran out of gas, almost ran out of budget for gas and had to supplement it because of the surge increase in gas prices. The electrical vehicles are less expensive when it comes to maintenance, certainly increasingly well suited for the short distance trips that our city vehicles generally require. And so it's economically feasible and environmentally helpful. Now there are some other things, and I'm gonna talk about another failure. You guys remember No Mow May, right? Okay. I'm sorry. All right, I meant well.
My neighbors didn't like it.
Right. Well, I'll tell you though, I try to find silver linings in things, and the community conversation, the robust community conversation that was sparked over, other people's grass was phenomenal. It really was, and it was an education as well. For me, for the administration, for council, for other neighbors in our community, learning about different ways that we can positively impact our environment, not just reduce our negative impact, but positively impact our environment. Increase our help for pollinators by growing, pollinator pathway plants, native plantings that help our pollinators. Taking some of that information that we received last year, this year we did something a little bit better because we learned from our mistakes. This year we did a Grow More May campaign that included a couple different things. One, it was sort of a request for people to self-select, to say, you know what, I've got all of this turf grass in my lawn. I am mowing it every week. I hate that. It uses gas because I don't have an electric mower yet. It's a lot of noise for my neighbors. It is worse than any gas-powered car out on the street right now because of the small two-stroke engines, putting all of these emissions, local emissions, into our atmosphere and into our lungs. So I'm going to take some of this turf grass and I'm going to carve out some space and I'm going to plant something else. Maybe it's pollinators. Maybe it's something a little bit less water intensive like clover, a little less needy when it comes to mowing, like creeping thyme, something beautiful. Now, we see a lot of examples around our city where people have done beautiful things with their yards and it's not all grass. This is the kind of thing that we wanted to highlight with our urban garden project, to give people an opportunity in a more structured way, trying to create a community of people who haven't done this before, but are willing to learn. And that's how we get people on board with making the changes that we need to see in our community, because it's not just about what the city does. The real impact will come when our community gets on board, puts solar on their houses, these sorts of things. And we've got a lot of work to do, but we've also done a lot of work to make those things more possible, getting through our city approval processes and that kind of thing.
Well, Mayor, I really, really appreciate your candor, your acknowledgement of some of the failures along the way, and how you have learned from those situations. I'm around a lot of local, state, national politicians, and that's not always the case. So I appreciate that. That is all of our questions for this evening?
Well, I don't think so.
Okay.
Now, this is the thing. This is what I was talking about from the lectern. There are some other questions. Okay. And I know that some of those questions were not sort of provided in the sort of the roll-up of a bunch of different things that came through. But I did want to bring up a couple other things. And specifically, I wanted to, pointedly address, I know that the family of Christian Tyson Thomas, some of his family members are here tonight with us. And they had some questions tonight. I think, there was the expectation that I would sort of speak generally about, the kinds of things that I am for or trying to work toward when it comes to, topics of policing and criminal justice reform and all of these things. But there were also some specific questions that I wanted to take some time to address, even though they might be kind of hard.
Please.
So one of the questions was, has the software been updated so that CHPD can adequately download and access body cam footage? Now, I want to make something clear. The body cam footage itself was very quickly downloaded and transmitted to the Bureau of Criminal Investigations. We're talking about the body cam footage from the incident, the officer-involved shooting incident. It was immediately provided to BCI in whole, no redaction. The difficulty arose when we had to go through a process of redacting that footage in order to provide it publicly to non-law enforcement requesters. Now, what I learned through this process, because sometimes you don't find something out until it becomes a problem, is that the software that we use to redact this footage is entirely too time intensive. It takes hours to get through a very short period because you have to go frame by frame in order to make redactions. You have to make sure that you are removing certain names, for instance, or addresses if they're spoken aloud. Additionally, this software is legacy software. I didn't select it. But as soon as I found this out, I made it clear that we needed a new process. We needed new software. And so I instructed the law department, which is in charge of making these determinations before public records are released. I instructed them to find and implement new software as quickly as possible. And the law department did two things. One, they started looking immediately. They selected a particular software, but then they also found another one for which we could get a free trial period so that we could start immediately with a new, more efficient and time-efficient software to do this. And as far as I am aware, after the implementation of that new software, the rest of that redaction took place relatively quickly and was released publicly. So the downloading and the accessing of the body cam footage wasn't the issue. It was the fact that there were certain legal requirements on redacting that footage before we could release it publicly. Now, the next question, has the administrative review started concerning the involved officers and supervisors? If so, who is doing the review? How long before the review is over? Okay, so a while back, I created a new bureau in the Division of Police. And that bureau is the Bureau of Professional Standards. The Bureau of Professional Standards consists of and is headed up by Captain Ernest Williams. Captain Ernest Williams and the Bureau of Professional Standards is the bureau that is tasked with investigating complaints about the department and administrative policy potential violations on the part of officers. It's sort of, the classic internal affairs sort of, capacity in the division. And the reason why I created this separate bureau is because I was anticipating the potential for discipline being necessary and there being a concern, not necessarily a reality, but a concern that keeping that discipline squarely within a chain of command could lead to, thoughts of impropriety or favor or disfavor not relating to the specific conduct being investigated. And so I wanted to create a separate bureau in order to do that. And please, just give me a second. So the reason for that is clear. However, this particular situation is more complicated. And the complication comes from the fact that there is a criminal investigation currently occurring. And so I will briefly run through this. Tiffany Tyson's family and came to the last city council meeting, and I sat and went through this a bit with them, but I'd like to explain this as well to everyone. When an incident like this occurs, the Bureau of Criminal Investigations will be called, and they were called in this case, to come pursue the criminal investigation to determine the evidence that would be required to discover whether or not criminal acts had been committed by officers in an officer-involved shooting or a critical incident, as they call it. So BCI, with no connection to our local department, come in, they investigate, they collect evidence, they collect testimony and witness statements, they look at the footage, they try to piece together every bit of evidence that they possibly can about the incident, at which point they turn that evidence over, because they don't make the determination themselves as to whether a criminal act has occurred. They turn that over to the appropriate prosecutorial agency. Now, most of Ohio, I believe it's the county prosecutor who will make that determination. However, our county prosecutor has decided, and I believe it's a standing rule, that our county prosecutor for the departments within his jurisdiction are not going to be subject to his prosecutorial decision-making, and instead should be provided to the state attorney general. They have a special prosecutions division that will be a step further removed in order to determine and take that evidence to a grand jury in order to determine whether or not a criminal act has occurred. So, our administrative review to see whether or not policies of the city of Cleveland Heights have been violated in any particular incident cannot supersede that criminal investigation or that prosecutorial and grand jury determination. The BCI needs to be able to collect all of the evidence, at which point it makes sense for us to have our administrative process sort of move toward completion. Now, I'm not involved in the first steps of that administrative investigation, and I wouldn't presume that I should be. I think politicians should probably step back from those sorts of law enforcement determinations and that initial administrative investigation piece. I will have access, and I will be involved in the administrative discussion. But right now, that falls on our Bureau of Professional Standards and our Chief of Police to work through that process and determine that in a way that does not interfere with the ongoing criminal investigation by the state government. So that's that question. It says, why haven't you released the involved officers' names and their personal files? So right now, we are legally prohibited from doing so. That may change. That may change. Currently, there is a case before the Supreme Court of Ohio that if the Supreme Court of Ohio makes a determination that what is now viewed as a legal requirement is not a legal requirement, then that circumstance may change. But under Marcy's law, right now, the interpretation is that we are legally prohibited from providing the identifying information about the police officers that have been involved. This is not a choice for the city of Cleveland Heights. This is a legal requirement until it is clear that it's not a legal requirement as determined by the Supreme Court of Ohio. The last question, and this is a harder one in a certain respect. Are you in support of a civilian police review board? The honest answer is I'm not sure. Part of that has to do with what that means. The specifics mean a lot in a determination about that kind of policy change. Now, what I am, undeniably and unequivocally, is very open to having the discussion both with the council, with the the Division of Police, with the community, with our law department. I'm very open to having that discussion about what that would mean, what it would achieve. I think that it is important that we remember policing isn't just about safety. It's also about our perception of safety. I learned from the mayor of Newark that the relationship between police and the community is one of the absolute most important things in keeping a community safe. Trust between the community at large and any division or department of police is crucial for learning about the truth of what happened when somebody is victimized. You cannot, have an honest interaction with even the victim of a crime if they're scared to tell you what happened. And so having that trust is extremely important, and I'm interested in fostering and improving on that trust-building relationship between police and our community. I don't know if a civilian review board, depending on the formation of it, the rules of it, the specifics of it, would achieve or be a detriment to that goal. But I am very interested in having the conversation so that we can get to a point where our community at large and our Division of Police and the public safety apparatus of our city is more in line, more in tune, more trusting of each other, and builds on what I think is a relatively solid foundation of care, concern, and trust for police in our community, in Cleveland Heights generally. I know that the death of Christian Tyson Thomas, I've said it before, it is and remains a tragedy in our community. No matter what the circumstances, this is a Cleveland Heights kid, and we care. And I know that finding a way to turn that tragedy into progress in our city, turning it into progress in the relationship among all of us, between us and our government, between us and our police, is one of the most important things that we can do to honor that, his importance. And so I'm going to work until we get it right. And perhaps a civilian review board is a part of that solution. I don't think it can be the whole solution, but it can be a part of that solution depending on how we implement it. So I wanted to get through those specific questions that I believe were offered. And then there are some more that if we've got time, it's 7:54, we got about 6 minutes. I can get through a bunch of questions. So there were a bunch of other questions from residents. I wanted to think about one that I think maybe the questioner didn't think I was going to address. It's sort of a two-part question. I'm not going to read the whole thing because there's a lot and we've got time constraints, but it's about our housing inspection process. This is from a realtor who believes that especially our point of sale inspection process is broken, that it takes too much time, it inhibits the movement of properties from seller to buyer, and it can kill deals if it's not done in an appropriate and timely manner. Not only that, but there are concerns that the inspection process isn't standardized enough yet so that, you know, you get an inspection from this inspector and it will be virtually the same as if you got it from the second inspector. Right? So I've got a lot of thoughts about this. I think that it's an appropriate and reasonable concern to have. On the one hand, we don't want, and we've seen from the fallout of the mortgage foreclosure crisis, we don't want properties that just move from owner to owner without having really intense violations addressed, because that just leads to a diminution of our property values and quality and could be the death of a city, right? So we have to have something in place, but it's got to be the right thing. So one of the things that I'm hoping for is that getting us to full strength in housing inspections will lead to a more rigorous process for verifying the reliability of inspections and guaranteeing the promptness of those inspections so that they don't inhibit the sale of properties. And that's going to be a process of process improvement. One of the things that I'm thinking of is sending a survey out to people who have purchased homes that got a point of sale inspection to see if 1 year or 2 years or 4 years down the line, if that property inspection caught violations that it should have. I know from personal experience in my house that there were things that should have been caught when I bought my house that I'm dealing with right now. Now that's a problem. It's a problem to address. So sending a survey when a homeowner has now discovered the problems that were missed, that's something that can inform our process here. The second piece is reliability. Maybe on certain samples, we send out 2 different inspectors and they both do the same inspection blindly. Maybe they don't even know that they're both being sent out, if we can figure that out. But, you know, that's the kind of thing that could increase reliability. Obviously, having us on full strength means that more people can do, you know, a more rigorous inspection job. Now, the second thing that she mentioned was our escrow process, because many times if there are violations, families are asked to put money in escrow to make sure that the funds are available, but then also basically have double the amount of money to address the violations that the inspection found so that they can pay for them, and then the escrow gets released back to them. I think that's a reasonable thing to take a look at. I don't think that we should ever get rid of completely the point of sale process. I think that we should make it more efficient. I think that maybe there's a possibility that we can dial back certain requirements. Like if the property is sold, it was inspected a year ago and then it's sold next year, maybe we don't need to do another property inspection a year later. But those sorts of things can be tinkered with around the edges to increase efficiency. But the escrow problem is something that I do think we need to manage directly. We don't want to tie people up. We know how tight money is. It's tight for most of us. And, you know, that's something you can't necessarily put, but that could mean that you can't buy the house that you and your family want to live in Cleveland Heights. If you got to put in, you know, escrow and then double the amount of money that you're putting aside to fix the violations, that could mean a family doesn't move into our community, right? So that's something that I'm very willing to address, and I'm looking forward to moving on that at some point in the near future when there's bandwidth to do so.
And Mayor, this will have to be the
I know.
I know they have a rehearsal.
Okay. Okay, so trying to see if there are some ones that I could answer really quick. Okay, what is specifically being done about absentee landlords, local landlords, et cetera, with respect to deteriorating properties and continued crime related to tenants in certain areas that have ongoing offenses being committed? Okay, I'll try to address that really quick, and I will not be able to address it fully. One of the things that I'm working on with council right now and that council is working on is sort of creating almost a renter's bill of rights in a certain respect, but also a tenant and landlord set of rights and responsibilities that are communicated clearly to both the tenant and the landlord about what they are responsible for and how they can you know, achieve redress if somebody's not fulfilling those responsibilities. I think that that's an important conversation that we need to have so that we can codify these responsibilities in a more specific, clear, and robust way and put the onus on some landlords to be able to provide that information to the tenants when they bring them on, and also potentially to provide a requirement for things like relocation expenses if the landlord is providing a non-habitable property for a tenant, these sorts of things that can really inhibit the city sort of placarding an address when it's not up to code, because we don't want to kick a tenant out into the streets. But having the landlord be responsible for things like relocation expenses might be a way that we can mitigate that concern and move forward on high-quality existing rentals in our community of Cleveland Heights.
Mayor, I must say I had started earlier when I was closing out to thanking you for your candor, your accountability, and I want to double down on that now, because as you all can see, the questions that the mayor just went through, which were very difficult questions, were not on the agenda. And I personally, I'll speak for myself, I appreciate the fact that you took those questions head on, and I really thank you for your honesty and your approach to this. I really do.
Well, I want to thank you for being here, helping me do this. This is the state of the city, but this isn't the end of the conversation. So I expect that we will all be having more of this conversation throughout the year until the next state of the city, and then hopefully beyond.
And again, I want to thank you all who are in attendance. We really appreciate you coming out and being part of the process. Again, if there was a question that was not asked that you'd like an answer to, please submit it through the Mayor's Action Center. Again, as we close out, please carefully, it's kind of dark in here, come down these stairs and exit. We have, again, a rehearsal at 8 o'clock. But I do encourage ongoing dialogue in the common areas in the lobby. So please, please feel free to do that. And press again, if you can meet the mayor beyond the glass, beyond the box office in the glassed off area, we'd appreciate it. Thank you all.